blockade and had evacuated all their troops before the Americans even arrived. Now, in another fog, sections of the 87th Regiment mistook each other for the enemy.
We had green officers and young green soldiers. The officers, one of them became somewhat panicky, and he sent out 2 patrols that night from I Company and K Company, and they ran into each other in the fog, and a firefight developed.
The next morning, the men learned the truth, that 11 of their comrades had been killed in the confusion, chasing an enemy that wasn't even there. The men headed home with a feeling of loss, but to their amazement, they were welcomed as heroes for taking the island.
Well, it was devastating. As I say, we felt terrible as we came back. And when we reached Fort Lewis, we were heroes. And not in our minds at all, but we were shocked at the fact that everybody thought we were wonderful.
As the mountaineers resumed training, they wondered when and if they would be given another chance in combat. Their first mission had been a needless tragedy, but the next one would make them the stuff of legends. By early 1944, the ski troops had been in training for nearly 2 years, but apart from the tragic sortie on Kiska Island, they were still waiting for a mission. Most of them were anxious to join the fight.
We didn't know whether we were going to ever see combat or what we were going to do. It was just, we were stagnating. At least we thought we were. Just like any soldiers, hell, we were being taught to fight, and we were ready to be shipped overseas, regardless of where it was, and start doing our part.
As they waited, the training got tougher. They learned how to climb, fight, and rescue on the mountain face.
In combat, I'm sure that it helped, because they knew how to take a mountain. They knew how to climb that mountain. And if there was a rock there, they knew what to do with that. Whereas some poor soul that was in a flatland unit, he wouldn't have the foggiest.
The training in itself put people in such vigorous physical condition that they could stand most things that other divisions could not. The ability to climb a mountain and think nothing of it, and carry a load up there, carry a load of ammo, whatever it happened to be.
The hard training on the cliff faces would prove to be even more important than snow training once the soldiers saw combat in Europe.
When we went up River Ridge, it was just the same as the work we trained for in hail, using ropes, and, being aware of each step, each grip, as you work up the cliff.
In March of 1944, the division was put through its toughest training of all, war games, designed as a dress rehearsal for battle. The men were ordered to head into the mountains, 11,000 feet above sea level, to live outside for 3 weeks straight. These were the infamous D-series maneuvers, and temperatures reached 40 below zero. On one day alone, 100 men had to be evacuated with frostbite.
Without fires, without anything to dry it, you had to find out how to survive in those conditions. And I thought they were going to kill off the whole division at one time.
The purpose behind D-series was to really see if the 10th had gotten the type of training which Washington and other people envisioned we should have. And we certainly proved that we had that type of training.
The division successfully endured D-series, but many in the Army top brass remained unconvinced that a mountain unit was worthwhile. Washington still didn't know how to use the 10th's unconventional skills.
Nobody really at high echelons of the Army wanted us. We were strange. The military mind, for the most part, the old military minds, they liked to take a round hole and a round peg to go together in a square hole, and we were not round.
By summer 1944, the Army had seen enough. it decided to shift the whole division from the snows of the Rockies to the heat of the Texas flatlands. The 10th was sent to Camp Swift, Texas.
It was pretty much of a disaster because we'd been at Camp Hale for almost 2 years and our blood was like molasses. And 4 days later, we're in Texas where the temperature's running 120 degrees. In fact, the first week we were there, they sent us out on what they call basic military marches, which were overnight events running 20, 25 miles, and people were just dropping right and left.
And that really hurt morale. People thought that here they had trained so hard to be a mountain unit and they were going to be turned into what they called a flatlander.
There were rumors that they were being shipped to the jungles of Burma, and the men's spirits hit an all-time low. But suddenly, everything changed. The American armies in Europe needed more troops. So in November of 1944, a battle-hardened war hero arrived as their new commander.
My name is George P. Hayes. I was the commanding general of the 10th Mountain Division.
Hayes was a Medal of Honor winner in World War I and had been sent to lead the 10th into battle.
He had just come from the European theater. And, he said, your objective is to kill Germans. And suddenly I realized, whoa, they really mean business in this thing.
He was a kind of a man that would not accept failure. He would not accept timidity on a commander's part. He'd be down there and see something wasn't going right. He'd relieve you right on the spot.
Just before Christmas, 1944, the mountain troops began boarding ships in Virginia, bound for parts unknown.
It wasn't until one morning on the USS West Point on the way across the Atlantic that it was announced officially that we were going to Italy. I felt personally a feeling of relief that I wasn't going to Burma.
One of the big subjects was, are you afraid to die? And when you think about the young fellows coming up with the conclusion that I'm not afraid to die, but I'm afraid how I will die. They didn't want to be maimed, they didn't want to be hurt, and most of them said, oh, a bullet between the eyes, that's it.
The 10th was joining a bitter conflict. American and British forces had landed in southern Italy 18 months earlier and had taken heavy casualties as they slowly pushed north against the Germans. By this time, Italy had ended its alliance with Hitler, but the Germans were still fighting to keep Italy for themselves. As the 10th Division arrived, the main battlefront was north of Florence. The Germans had created a fortress-like defense in the Apennine mountain range. Beyond the Apennines lay the Po Valley, Italy's industrial heartland, still in German hands. Breaking the German line was vital, so the 10th was sent straight to the Apennines to join the American 5th Army and the British 8th Army. It was a natural assignment for the 10th. This was the sort of terrain they had been training for. In January, the 16,000 men of the 10th began making camp in the Apennine foothills, in clear view of their enemies above. Combat was now only days away.
Trepidation. Would we measure up? The exposure that we had now was real. This was not a training mission. We felt pretty confident that we could do things, but we were unproven. In some cases, even to ourselves.
For the young men of the 10th, the tiny mountain towns of Italy were unlike anything they'd ever seen. Two of them, John Embry and Tom Brooks, returned to the village of Viticiatico more than half a century later and remembered what it was like to arrive there as green troops.
Well, I remember here I am, a 19-year-old kid, for the first time in Europe, and where I am in medieval villages, hill villages. We're out of the flatlands of Texas. It was a feeling of wonder.
It was fascinating. It was something new. Well, even the mountains are new. They're not like the Colorado Rockies, And it was certainly an improvement over Texas.
Many Italian civilians opened their homes and farms to the American soldiers to use as shelter, even though it turned them into targets from German shelling.